I'm tired.
The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
February.
First week in February.
We have something in between called Winter Session, which is it's kind of nice. It's like more fun classes and workshops.
Okay.
They don't get it's not graded.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was going to say the opposite. I was thinking maybe like a 4-week intensive, squeeze it in.
No.
Okay. You always wear that sweatshirt, or is that just in honor of the official
my first-
communications minister?
No, it's just
Yeah,
when
it's my
you're
first
on.
time. So when you're
He has an Orion Mirage one. He's got a. He's had a good. You had a fair number of.
non-ISKCON?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hare Krishna, everyone. This is the Namras podcast, the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm so honored to have Anuttama Prabhu here with us. Thank you, Anuttama Prabhu. I really appreciate you joining us. And so for those of you who don't know, Anuttama Prabhu is a Srila Prabhupada disciple, a longtime member of ISKCON in North America, also a member of the GBC, the governing body of ISKCON.
Commission, Governing Body Commission.
Governing Body Commission, yes. And so first, maybe let's start off really briefly, Prabhu. How did you join? Where did you join? That whole deal.
Okay. I became a member of ISKCON in Denver, Colorado in 1975. I first met devotees in high school. I took a religion course as a senior. I had no interest at all in religion. I thought it was a pretty stupid thing. But some of my best friends were in the religion class, and I had signed up to an economics class, which when I went there was all the jocks, people I knew, but I didn't really want to hang with because I was a senior, and you want to hang with jocks when you're a senior. You want to do something more fun.
Yeah.
So I took this religion class, but and devotees came later in the semester. But it was.
Devotees came as in there were guest speakers.
Yeah,
in the
they were
class?
guest speakers. We went to synagogue. The Hare Krishnas came. I can't remember what other things we did, but I just remember that the thing that really impressed me was when we studied Buddhism, and about how Buddha had said that that the world is suffering, and that the cause of suffering is desire. And I was thinking, as a senior in high school, about ready to launch into college and pursue a career and do everything that everybody does in the world to try to make money and get things. And now at 17, you're telling me there's ideas out there that getting things won't make you happy. And why didn't anybody ever tell me this before the first 11 and a half years of college or of high school, of school?
Right.
So, yeah. So that got me kind of interested. Then, I mean, my story's a little kind of longer than most. I didn't have like an aha moment with the devotees so much, but I went to university. I was very involved in social movements and studied political philosophy. Was thinking about how to make the world a nice place. So studied Rousseau and Marx and Hobbes and Aristotle and Plato and all those big thinkers. And remember, in my second year, I went to my favorite professor and said, I'm starting to understand. We read these 300, 400, 500, 600-page volumes written by these great thinkers, how the society should be organized. But the thing is, each one of them has a set of assumptions, the first 20 pages. Like Karl Marx says, human society is a class warfare. We have to somehow address this. Locke, which is kind of the father of capitalism, says, no, we're just individuals roaming around in the forest. We had to come together and create a system so we don't kill each other. So they have these assumptions. So I told my professor, I said, rather than have me, an undergraduate, write a long, 20-page paper critiquing these geniuses, we should discuss the truth or the untruth of their assumptions. And his answer to me was, we're not here to discuss truth. And I thought, then why am I paying you $10,000 a year to learn something that you yourself aren't sure is true? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking as a young person, I want to go out and try to make the world a better place. And I'm looking at different ideas how to do that. And they all contradict each other and doesn't really seem to make sense. And there must be some better answers than this. In the meantime, I was working as a bartender. So I was trying to enjoy life to the fullest as an 18-year-old back in the days when the drinking age was 18. I think they changed that everywhere now. I don't know for sure.
21, I think.
Yeah, it was
everywhere.
It was 18, yeah. So that seemed to be like a lot of fun, but then it was mode of passion. When I read the Gita later, it was like, whoa, this is my life here. Pleasure to mode of passion. It's like nectar in the beginning, like poison at the end. I've been there, done that. Mm-hmm. I switched universities at a certain point in time because I was convinced that this isn't working. I was the head of the student government, one of the heads of the student government. We had a whole political campaign to be able to review the professors, and we actually won. We convinced enough people within the University Congress that the students would have an access to that. The last day of the semester, we passed it through. It was like big victory for all the students, and it went to the university president was kind of overseeing the whole thing. And he said, okay, I'm going to take this decision under consideration. I'm going to send it to the College of the Deans for their final decision. For 10 months, nobody had ever mentioned the College of the Deans. Nobody ever mentioned that they had, I don't like to use the word Trump these days. They trumped our ability to make this decision.
Yeah.
But they did. He basically cheated us. So I sat there, all the students, there was 30 of us out of about 300, I was personally thinking, if there's this much cheating goes on at the level of university politics, what must go on where there's real money and there's real power involved? So that kind of convinced me I don't want to go into government work, which I've been kind of considering. And the later yes with the vote, that all led up to like, okay, I'm open for there must be some other solution, some other answers. So at the same college when I switched, I was at Michigan State. I left there because of this experience and others. Went to University of Michigan, got a job as a bartender, quit school at a certain point in time, used to hang out with the Jesus freaks, then I'd go to the Methodist church, then I would sometimes visit the Hare Krishna temple, went to Buddhist retreats, and it all kind of convinced me that there must be something there, but I'm not sure what. I met a girl at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She said, if you're serious about spiritual life, you have to go to Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. I've often thought if I was really spiritually grounded, I would have got a message to go to like Nepal or something, but I wasn't ready for that. So then I hitchhiked around the country for a couple of months, ended up in Boulder. And I had $75 left after all my traveling, and I thought, I don't want to go back to my girlfriend. I don't want to go back to the same college. I don't want to go back to the same job. I don't want to go back. So what do I do? So the Hare Krishna temple, they said, you can stay here for a week if you want to try this out for free. And then Baba Ramdas, who was a big deal in those days, there was a music retreat.
This is Richard Alpert?
Richard Alpert.
Ramdas?
Yep,
Wow.
Yep. There was a music retreat that he was participating in. It was $75. So being the mundane personality that I am, I thought, well, if I spend $75 on that retreat and it doesn't work out, it's not what my calling is, then I'm broke. I got to go back to what I don't want to go back to. But if I stay with the Hare Krishnas and it turns out to not be what really I should do, well, then I still have my $75. So I made a very practical decision. I moved in the temple of the Hare Krishnas. That was my start.
That was it.
And the first night I was there, a little spirituality to the story. It's not all too mundane. I prayed, dear Krishna, dear Buddha, dear Rama, dear Jesus, dear Allah, whoever you are, wherever you are, please, if this is not what I'm supposed to do, please show me. Mm-hmm. And then I made a promise to myself. I said, I'm not going to go back. If this ashram bhakti yoga is not really a way forward for me, at least to find God, find truth, I'm not going to leave unless I find something better. So I haven't found anything better.
You haven't left since?
I haven't left. I'm still here.
Just as a side note, I have to admit, I'm a little jealous when I hear stories like that. Like that doesn't happen these days anymore. Even just the ability to like hitchhike around, like none of us have stories like that, right?
No,
like
you can't.
These days, it's like
I would not hitchhike around these days.
No,
it's a different.
No, these days everyone's just like, how did you discover bhakti? Oh, I saw this website, I saw this, post on Instagram, but like you all were like hitchhiking, you were moving into ashrams and saying like, this is it. Like, I mean, I'm sure it had its downsides as well, but there's something really kind of amazing.
Well, I think for me there was very much a two-part process, which is simultaneously getting some sense that there has to be something higher than what I'm being told, in the material or mundane concept of like there has to be. There's too many people saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You study even, you listen to music. Cat Stevens in that era, who later on went on became a devotionally inspired Muslim.
Right.
Out on the edge of darkness, there lies a peace train. Peace train's waiting. We got to go find it. And so much of the music of that era, George Harrison and the Moody Blues, and so many people about looking for something. And then you read the Bible. I didn't read much of the Quran, but the Buddhist teachings and different spirits. They're all saying there's something better. There's something different. There's something other. And human life, you have the opportunity to seek it. Mm-hmm. Which on the one hand is like, forget it. Come on, give me a break. But when you're trying to dive into everything that people tell you to enjoy, and again, like the Bhagavatam kind of held true for me. It's like diving into a shallow river, smashing your face against the ground. I mean, I worked in a bar. I'm watching knife fights in front of the bar. I mean, I have memories of like watching this one guy came in every Friday night, used the same lines on a different woman and went home with her, came back the next Friday by himself. It's like, what's going on there? You know, you see things like that.
You're actually seeing like the material world stripped bare.
Yeah, I've seen them. You know, part of the bar was you worked in the front taking care of the people sitting in the bar, and then it was a big place, hundreds of people. So there was like all the waitresses that worked in the back, and some really nice, very attractive young women, waitresses. And, you know, it wasn't a sleazy bar, but they were in attractive outfits because that's what they do in the material world. And, you know, sometimes these young women coming back in tears because this drunk slob up there is groping them as they're just trying to make enough money to keep going to college and just realizing this is a nice person. Why does she have to go through that? You know, all those. And this is a place of enjoyment. And then my biggest bar story, in a sense, was at 2:00, the bar closes. Everybody stays afterwards. The guy that runs the kitchen brings out the free pizzas. This was an automated bar, so they had ways of controlling the liquor because they didn't want the employees to steal everything. But we all figured out there were certain ways you could get free drinks. So after it's 2:00 in the morning, free liquor, free pizza. Everybody goes upstairs where the foosballs are and the pool table. It's like, wow. It's like material heaven. You know, young girls. It's like, wow, this is exciting.
You're living the life.
Living the life. And then after like about 2-3 weeks, it gets really tired. And then I started noticing the only people that hung out were the new employees. The people that had been there for a while, it's like, I'm going home, going to sleep.
Yeah.
Chewing the chewed. It's
Chewing
like,
the chewed. It's like the whole thing. You know, it's like,
Chapla
yeah, so simultaneously, like, well, there must be something else. And when this is not working out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like you kind of get, nowadays I would say, you know, Krishna's grace, you just get squeezed. It's like, I got to seek something else.
In
Too
some
many
ways,
experiences like that. Too many.
yeah.
Too many.
Like, I understand how devotees join during Srila Prabhupada's time, but I also like to hear, and I'm really interested in how devotees stuck around post Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
What was your experience after, like, when all that, like, all the crazy stuff happened?
I came later. I came in 75.
Right.
And I was initiated in 76. Prabhupada passed away late 77.
Right.
So for me, that era was a little bit kind of merged. There wasn't really a long period with Prabhupada here and a long period afterwards.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can remember funny things like as a brahmachari downstairs in the lower level, we all slept upstairs. And one day I'm standing outside the shower room, putting on tilak in the big mirror. And I hear this like boom, 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 boom upstairs. Footprints, but not like running, like way in the back. And then I hear it behind me on the stairs, boom, 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 running down the stairs. And then behind me, I see in this mirror, this one guy, boom, 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 like running. The door flies open and boom, 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 out to the door. And as I imagine it, we all kind of walked out there in our gumshoes and looked out like we're watching him run down the street. Never to be seen again.
Wait,
like,
he just escaped. Some guy just escaped.
He just decided he couldn't deal with it anymore. It's like, you know, can you be a little mature about this? Just tell us that, you know, you're cutting out or something.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
But I mean, it wasn't like he was held against his will. It just somehow he bought in the idea this is the life I should lead and I should practice austerity and I should be spiritual, but I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So he just ran out the door. I mean, we didn't have a lot of
people literally ran out the door.
Literally ran out the door. You know? So there was a lot of naivety. I remember. I mean, these are, you know, just part of the experience you're asking. I remember there was one nice devotee named Virachandra. When I joined the temple, he was one of the cooks. And after I was there maybe a month or so, and he moved out of the temple, and he came back for the Sunday feast a few weeks later. And I remember the devotees were all like, wow, you're back. He was like, yeah, I'm back, you know. And then it was like, okay, well, where's your sleeping bag? Well, it's at my apartment. What do you mean it's at your apartment? Well, you're back, right? So there was this very, very, very narrow-minded sense of who's in, who's out, what it means to be a devotee of Krishna.
We were just talking about.
Yeah, it was very, very immature, and you know, and these days it's kind of embarrassing. But I think it's important to understand these things because a similar tendency can resurface itself today, and we have to watch out for that. I mean, that's part of like what communications, the work that I do. Venkata was a North American director for a few years, and till a bigger organization had a better gig for him, but he was with this guy for quite a while before Princeton pulled him away. But a lot of that is seen, okay, so we had those tendencies to see things kind of black and white, naively then. How might we still be doing that today? In what ways are those same human frailties manifested today? And I think that's something we all have to be on the lookout for.
How do you see those manifested today?
For one, I'm very concerned, as are many devotees around the world. I don't know if that's the accurate term, but guru groupism. I think that's a big problem for ISKCON. When we see this acting out in so many ways, because we read Prabhupada's books. I mean, the extreme is the Ritvik folks, who go, okay, there's been problems with gurus, therefore no gurus.
Right.
It's kind of like going to the doctor and saying, well, you're ill, and he says, okay, we're just going to cut out your heart or something, and we're just going to dismantle the whole system. There's something wrong. So I think the overemphasis on Diksha Guru, instead of understanding, like the disciple course that I had the honor of being part of the team that put it together. I think one of the most important things there is emphasizing we all have a relationship with Prabhupada. He's the founder Acharya. We all have relationships with different people that mentor us, or like Siksha gurus. And then many of us will decide to take a Diksha guru, initiating spiritual master. Sometimes what happens is like, okay, now I have an initiating Diksha guru. Prabhupada becomes way in the back. Siksha gurus become way in the back, and it's all about this one person. So I become a little bit of a fanatic, and in one sense, it's explainable. It's kind of like Christians, frankly, who just decide like Jesus is it. And there's some brand of Christianity. It's all about Jesus. It's not about the Bible. It's not about, hey, what about all the other denominations? About my Jesus and my church and this and everybody else is wrong. We've all met people like that. So I think that tendency, kind of exclusiveness in an immature way, is something that we're vulnerable for. And hopefully, we're moving away from that. But the real danger is there's so much power invested in anybody. I mean, you got power in the podcast. Somebody just watches your podcast all the time and doesn't listen to anything else in the world. They've given you a lot of power to give them directions how they need to think about stuff.
Right.
So same way, somebody that invests inordinate power in a single person, whoever they are, in their mind, there's a good chance they're going to be misled, or at the very least, not take advantage of the opportunities that are there.
But doesn't the ISKCON like checks and balances of like who can give initiation and thing help with that? Because then the people that are given that power, they're bona fide in a sort of way, right?
That's one reason I'm of the school of thought, which is the majority at this time, and I think will continue to be, that there needs to be some oversight of who can be a guru, Diksha guru, who, what are the requirements for initiation. And some people, and I think I know they're very well intended, but they say there should be no oversight at all.
Right.
The guru should decide, the disciples should decide. But the difficulty of that is, and I often give like a university example, if I was smart enough, if I'd gotten into Princeton, I went to a University of Michigan, I don't think it cuts a grade there, but I assume when I open the book or I look online and I'm okay, these are all the professors that teach English, I'm assuming you checked out those people first.
Right.
Now it's up to me which one I'm going to choose, but it's your job to make sure they fulfill those minimum requirements.
Right, there's some vetting.
That the institution has to perform. So I think that's so I think like, ISKCON in general, the GBC's tried to take as much of a hands-off on that as possible. It's an individual choice. We know in the past it got too much geographically determined, the whole zonal Acharya time.
Yes.
And, if you were in India, you got initiated by these people. If you were in South America, it was these people. That was not the best system by any means. So we have to give as much individuality as possible, but there's got to be some preliminary vetting. So I think still there's this tendency to become too much focused on one person, or sometimes even one temple. I'm a member of whatever, Tawaco, I don't like Brooklyn, or I go to Brooklyn, I don't go to 26 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Or, I'm Baltimore, I don't go to DC, I don't like DC. I go, okay.
What is another like negative outcome of having that guru groupism?
Oh, there's all kinds. As a community, we become divided into factions.
Right.
That's definitely
Cliques
possibility. Cliques and personality cults and everything else.
Yeah.
That's one disadvantage. as an individual, it cuts you off from Prabhupada created a multi-guru society. It's very, very horizontally dispersed. It's not so much a vertical community that he created. So if I'm only hearing from Venkata and I don't want to hear from anybody else, well, Nam's got a lot of good things that I can learn from too. But sometimes it may feel like I just want to hear from Venkata because don't bother me with the complexities of life and of the world. And, Venkata says, Anuttama, stay brahmachari. And I don't want to hear from Nanda. Goes, no, Anuttama, this grahastha life is also a good option. No, I don't want to think about that. I just want to go.
So you can cherry pick the kind of particular messaging.
Or it just makes it black and white.
Yeah.
It makes it more simple.
Yeah, it makes it more simple. Which is kind of natural in some ways. But as we mature as individuals, as communities, as a global society, I think we have to be able to, we have to become more comfortable with the nuances and the differences. And
I'm wondering about the other side of the extreme, though, which you alluded to the sort of the Ritvik philosophy, which I think is still considered kind of a deviation or
because that's a critical thing to say. There's no more gurus,
right? But then, maybe not going that far. But have you seen sort of instances where maybe the Diksha Guru is so de-emphasized that it's like butting up against that sort of Ritvikism? Because I've just personally, I've noticed certain pockets of, sort of the ISKCON world where there's such an emphasis on Prabhupada and it feels like such a sort of a move to de-emphasize the Diksha Guru that it almost feels like a kind of a Ritvik light kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, that person's your Diksha Guru, but that's just a formality. Really, it's all about Prabhupada. Really, have you come across that?
I don't know if I personally have, but I can see how that could happen in some situations. And again, I think that's where the balance has to be there.
Yeah.
And I think it's a natural balance. And I think sometimes I facilitate the disciple course, and this particular part about Prabhupada's role in our lives and our Diksha Guru and Siksha Guru. And I think sometimes it's kind of like as a young person, it's a natural thing. Sometimes, let's say if you come from a family, mom and dad are both there, sometimes you feel really close to your mom. Yeah. And you're not really, your dad seems to be like a real pain in the neck for a while, or you don't feel so close. Other times you feel really close to your dad and not so close to your mom. And every once in a while you're not feeling particularly close to both of them, but, grandpa's there or grandma's there. It's just, not to make it too ordinary, but within the range of human relationships, it's just natural. So if we just had one senior person in our life, only the father, no aunts, no uncles, no grandparents, no mother, if we only had the mother, etc., it's not the natural way. There's meant to be some balance source from us. And so I think that's important. So your point, it has to be kept in appropriate balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard you use the phrase personality cult, and I think that's concerning. And I think it's equally concerning when devotees can take something beautiful like devotion and appreciation towards Prabhupada and make that into a personality cult, right? And there's so many examples of Srila Prabhupada himself really ensuring that ISKCON was not, like so many new religious movements of the day, was not a personality cult centered around him, but was about
the
Krishna.
International
right?
Society for Krishna Consciousness, not Prabhupada consciousness.
Yeah.
A lot of people may know about ISKCON or visit ISKCON temples in a long time before they really know who's the person who brought it to America, who's the person who wrote these books. Sometimes they'll ask, who's the guy sitting on the chair? Does he ever move?
Yeah.
But other than that, I'll give an example. Like from my personal experience, and we use the personality cult, the danger of that. I have a clear memory of being in the Los Angeles temple during Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja, and one of the disciples of the Guru, who was the Guru from that area at that time after Prabhupada's passing away. So we're chanting Jai Prabhupada. I was just kind of one of the people standing there, wasn't leading or anything. And at a certain point in time, this disciple of a current Guru then literally took the microphone and started chanting the name of his initiating spiritual master. Okay, because he's thinking, my duty is to okay, that's your guru, your guy, so-called. What about my guy?
Right.
And when that guru had some trouble years later, eventually came back. He's doing some nice service now. He did the whole circle. But when his guru had problems and go away, he was one of the first ones to leave.
The person who taken the mic.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I call a personality cult.
Right.
It was like, he's the guy. If that person lets me down, the whole house of cards falls apart. As opposed to understanding this is a very broad historic tradition. We've got great avatars and saints and sources going back many, many centuries. I'm drawing strength from all of them.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of support.
Right.
It's not just one person.
Not just dependent on this one person.
Yeah, not just one person. If he rises, I rise. If he falls, I fall. It's like, well, I'm very indebted. In case of addiction, we're very, 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 very indebted and appreciative and grateful, and to somewhat dependent upon that person. But it's not the exclusives. That's other than Krishna, we don't really believe in exclusives.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of personality cult, since we're using the word cult.
You and I had some TV shows on that, and
We've
radio interviews in the past.
We've done some things on around. Yeah. In fact, one of the
not that we started a cult or anything like that.
No.
That we were
we just continued a cult. That was already
when you were the. No, actually, I go every year to the. Now it's called the International Cultic Studies Association. I missed a couple years because of COVID. But this last year, I took the co-director of North American Communications, Kumari Kunti, Devi Dasi, because I wanted some younger devotees to be introduced, because I'm getting older, obviously. And
just if you could unpack, because that's a very formal name, but what is this organization essentially?
Okay, it's actually a kind of a coalition of different organizations, some of which are composed of mental health practitioners, some are composed of parents, of people who've joined different new religious movements or organizations that they feel are dangerous. Some are ex-members of some of these organizations.
This is what used to be called anti-cult people.
Yeah, anti-cult. So that's International Cultic Studies Association. And some are academics. So those are kind of the four sources of those groups. So they have a conference every year, and I started going 1990s sometimes, just to kind of, put it, hey, I'm a Hare Krishna, and I'm doing communications, and you folks have some problems with us, so let's talk about it. And some of them, it was like, well, you guys are doing this and this and this, you're right, and here's why we do it, and here's why we think it's a good thing. And other things where you do this and this and this was like, well, actually, we don't do that. And we agree with you. That's not a good thing. And other things like, well, you do this. Like, well, no, we don't do that anymore. I can tell a little story about that if we get time.
Yeah.
So the first, we used to be called the American Family Foundation. And when ISKCON, 1996, ISKCON's 30th anniversary, just before you started doing communications work. So there was an article in the New York Times, and the headline was, Hare Krishna's at 30. Real changes or just PR? That was the headline. So I called up the reporter, who I knew. His name was Gus Niebuhr. I said, hey, Gus, this is a story about Hare Krishna's 30th anniversary. It's not about, being accused of being a cult or brainwashing people or whatever was there before and a little bit still there in the 90s. Why'd you put this in the story? And he told me, he said, I remember very clearly, he said, Anuttama, it's out there, deal with it. So that, okay, well, New York Times guys tells you better deal with it. Okay, Krishna's telling me I got to deal with it. So he gave me the name of a woman who was quoted in the article, her number. I called her up, said who I was, and she said, well, you don't need to talk to me. You should talk to the head of our organization. And I called him up. He said, well, thanks for calling. Actually, we're doing a study of the Hare Krishnas right now, of cultic groups, and maybe you can help us get access to the Hare Krishnas. And I said, well, maybe, but it's the first time we've talked to each other, and this is kind of like the first date, so let's go slow. I don't think I said that, but that's what I was thinking.
And this is the person who's the head of the anti-cult.
Head of the whole global cooperation, right? But then what he told me was we've actually got a conference in Washington, D.C. coming up within a few weeks or so. So I went to that, and it brought a devotee named Hari Das, who was working at that time on his PhD in pastoral counseling or something like that. So, he has some academic credibility that they'll appreciate. So we went to this conference and to this daily conference, all-day conference. One person stands up, talks about brainwashing is a real thing and we got to be really worried about these groups. And the next person stands up and says, there's no such thing as brainwashing. We have to understand how different social influences act on people. So then I could understand there's differences of opinion within this organization. And it's like, you folks realize there's difference of opinion within our organization. You can't brand us with one broad pain, stroke at the same time. So here's the story. So we went to dinner with them. There's a vegetarian restaurant in Washington, D.C. called Vegetable Garden. It used to be kind of close to the temple, and used to go and see congregations.
I remember Vegetable Garden very well.
So, so I arranged to meet these people there. And, of course, I'm wearing my dhoti the whole time. It's like that. So Haridas came, my wife Rukmini came, I was there, and then this gentleman, Michael, and someone, David, who was in the organization, who's still there, and another lady, I don't remember her name. But so we sit down at this dinner, 1996, okay? Keep that date in mind. So we sit down, and one of them asks me, they say, by the way, how's Kirtananda doing? Okay, 96, they're asking me this. So I remember, literally clearing my throat. I think my face turned a little red. And I said, well, actually, glad you asked that. He's no longer in our movement. He was expelled 10 years ago. He did some illegal things. We worked with the federal government to help have him prosecuted and put in jail. He doesn't represent us anymore, and he's not part of us. And they were like, that's very interesting. We didn't know that. Thank you. So, natural conversation. Without any forethought, I just asked them, how's Ted Patrick doing? Okay. Now, some of your viewers may not know Ted Patrick. His nickname was Black Lightning. He was one of the first people that really popularized kidnapping people from whatever community. It could be a political community, religious community, whatever. Kidnapping them, taking them away to some cabin in the woods, basically torturing them until they recant whatever their affiliation is.
He's like the father of deprogramming.
Father deprogrammed.
Lou Grant show. Remember that one?
Yeah. Lou Grant. So, so I just innocently asked them, so how's Ted Patrick? Okay. So, and they cleared their throats, their faces turned red. They were a little uncomfortable. And they said, well, actually, Ted Patrick doesn't represent us anymore. We've abandoned the things that he advocates. He's actually went to jail, and he has nothing to do with this anymore. Okay.
Wow.
So at that point, hey, now we're on the equal playing ground here. Okay?
Yeah, you both have your...
We both got our skeletons in our closet, and we both moved beyond it. Can we talk like reasonable people and get rid of these stereotypes?
Yeah. Wow.
So that was, I think, a pivotal moment. And so I started going to their conferences for years. And, and you walk in one, and a guy stands up, tells you everybody's brainwashed. He looks at you like you must be a zombie. And you go to the next one, and they treat you like, anybody else with respect. Yeah. And over the years, it's been very informative. I mean, I've taken back a lot of things that I've learned because I go there to learn. There's no doubt human beings are subject to what most of the people in that genre now talk about undue influence. Like the classic example is the 85-year-old lady who she's passing away soon, and she's got a private nurse who nobody sees the old lady but the private nurse for the last 3 months. And when she dies, lo and behold, the will now gives everything to the nurse. Forgetting the son and the daughter that live in California, everything else. Well, okay, somebody got to her, obviously, the nurse, like that. So undue influence, where people are sometimes vulnerable and they can be influenced to do things that they wouldn't do in other situations. So they started talking about, so what's the paradigm of influence? How much undue influence might be there in the military? Yeah. You got a lot of control over people. And that there's organization. So you're on a scale of like more healthy, less healthy. How does that play out? And what can ISKCON or any other organization do to have checks and balances in place to make sure we're not on the unhealthy side, but we're on the healthy side?
Yeah. Right.
And we had, Rabina Soup came and gave a presentation one day when you rotted out. We probably had 8 or 10 different Hare Krishna speakers come at their conference. Yeah. And there's also some former Hare Krishna devotees that are there talking about, the organization had this problem, that problem. And most of them, it's about stuff that happened 30 years ago. Right. So it's like, hey, put it on the table. Let's talk about what we did wrong. Yeah. Just one of the interesting things. I remember one year they had a whole track on the Catholic Church. A whole, from day one to the end, there was a thing on the Catholic Church every single session. And I went to one thing with a former priest who was a member of a group within the Catholic Church. What do they call them? They have different orders. It was an order in the Catholic Church called Legionnaires of Christ. really bad.
What? So there's
really bad.
cults within the Catholic Church?
Yeah, it's like they have their different orders. Like there's Dominicans and Franciscans, and
Well, there's Opus Dei, which got really famous when I guess the Da Vinci Code came out, and suddenly everyone was like, "Oh, what's going on with Opus Dei? They're really like extremists." Yeah, but you were saying there's these.
So they have
orders.
all these. So there was this whole track on the Catholic Church, and I remember. So I go to this one presentation at this anti-cult conference, and there's a former Catholic priest talking about how much abuse went on, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse within this Catholic order. And then the next session, they had a bishop, a Catholic bishop speaking. And he's standing up there talking about, there's all these groups, not us, we're the Catholic Church. You know, there's all these groups, and it's good you're all meeting to talk about all these groups. I was thinking, excuse me, buddy, you should go on the last session. One of your people is talking about what you guys are doing. Can we be a little honest here and open? Talk about, these are human frailties, and everybody needs to be on guard. The office, I think these days they say there's less of it because the work dynamics, because, you can expose people so much easier now. But, the office environment used to be pretty dangerous. If you're a young woman and he's the boss, and whoa, watch out, sexual exploitation in the office.
Yeah.
Right.
That's abuse of power. So it can happen in the office, it can happen in a religious group, it can happen in the university, et cetera. So we all have to be on guard about abuse of power.
Yeah. One of the things I remember going to a couple of those, I think I've gotten to attend with you at least 2 or 3. And I remember just being really struck by and impressed with how the whole discourse had shifted from, this kind of like, is XYZ group a cult or not? Just very black and white sort of categorizing, to kind of more of what you're describing here, where let's talk about a spectrum, and let's talk about, when we're sort of in a more healthy space and a less healthy space. And I think that's incredibly honest and refreshing. And I remember just being really struck by once you shift that question, there's so much more we can learn, right? Just to go in with like, okay, is ISKCON a cult or not? That's, first of all, it's not even such an interesting question, right? But once we started talking about, well, what does it mean to be cultic or cultish or culty? Then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, wait a second. I remember there are times when, in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I wasn't so comfortable with that, and maybe we shouldn't, right?
A couple times at the ISKCON Leadership Conference in Mayapur, we made presentation on is ISKCON a cult? Because that whole paradigm is cultic behavior. It's not you're good or you're bad. It's a question of it's a paradigm.
What is our behavior? What are our actions reflecting? Right. But I imagine you got some flack for that from devotees. Like, why are you even, or no, just in general, like, why are you even hanging out? They're the enemy. Why are you hanging out with these guys? And how dare they suggest that ISKCON, anything's wrong
we get
with
that for all kinds of different reasons for hanging out with different people. I mean, why do we hang out with different religions? Well, because we're going to learn something. Well, you can't learn something. We know everything. Okay, Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Glad you're happy. Keep doing what you're doing. That's fine. But if any time you ever think you maybe could learn from other people, we're here to talk with you. Same thing, I mean, I get to do all kinds of fun stuff. I go to the American Academy of Religion most years. And I'm not a scholar. I'm not trained as a scholar. But it's fun to go and learn about other people's viewpoints and other religious organizations and some of the problems that they've had, and learn from them. The interfaith dialogues that we've been having for almost 30 years now. That's the whole mood of it is, okay, we come from a very deep and rich tradition, and here's what we've learned and maybe a few things we've realized about God. We'd like to share those with you. Can you tell us what you know about God? Help us understand better. And those can be really rich. But, anytime, we all know, you meet somebody like the expression know-it-all, right? When you meet a know-it-all, you can't have a conversation with a know-it-all because they know it all. There's no point talking with them anymore. Whether they're a Hare Krishna or a Baptist or a Catholic or a, fanatic Muslim, a fanatic Hindu, a fanatic Jew, a fanatic Christian, a fanatic Hare Krishna. I mean, there's no scope for growth.
Yeah. At these interfaith, or not interfaith, at the anti-cult conference, you mentioned, interacting with former devotees. How's that experience? I mean, is that because you're obviously there in a very you're open about. You're not there in like a trench coat and a baseball cap and dark sunglasses pretending to be someone else, right? You're
yeah, no, I'm there. I'm full on.
And
all the devotees that have ever had go to those events that are actually there as ISKCON people, we always wear full devotional gear.
And you've got folks there who said, "Yeah, I was a member of this organization and I left, and it was cultic."
Why are they there in the first place?
Oh, that's a whole deep psychological question.
They want to prove something that is a cult, or that it does have cultish.
Some of them have had. I'll just say how I perceive they perceive it.
Sure.
They had some good, but some very negative experiences in ISKCON. They feel those hold true to the patterns of harmful or dangerous organizations, and they want to share their experience for the benefit of others. That's the most positive, I think. I think there's some people that, it's nice to be honored in any kind of group, to be a spokesperson with a particular unique perspective on things.
It can be very affirming and healing, I think, for many of them to feel like, they've been through some trauma, and it's like, wow, I'm in a space where people,
And I think some of them legitimately feel that there may be parts of ISKCON or all of ISKCON, they may feel, I think they're completely wrong, but they may feel there certainly may be parts where some of those patterns that they suffered from may still exist, so that they feel it's part of their responsibility to share those, which I respect that. It's like, okay, great. But again, let's sit and talk. Let's talk about what can be fixed.
Yeah.
Let's not just throw stones. I mean, y'all throw stones, everybody gets hurt. Let's talk about and that was the thing that made it possible for me to go to these organizations and meet with them. When they say, we've moved beyond Ted Patrick, that's basically saying we used to buy into this paradigm that we can just kidnap people off the streets and force them to change their beliefs because we think you're forcing people to believe something. So, hey, let's acknowledge we both have problems with that, and at least some pockets of problems. Let's move beyond that.
Yeah.
So that kind of openness, you can grow. And I think that's symptomatic of what's kind of going on in the world at large now. People don't want to talk to each other. They demonize everybody.
Yeah.
When I was driving up here for the weekend in New York, New Jersey area, I was listening to some talk radio, and I just turned on for 20 minutes, and at the end of it, I thought, first there was an ad for some new film called Police State. It didn't seem like it was like a top film, but, there's so many people who make films. And, they play some of the voiceovers like, they're coming to get us next. Oh, my God, it's the FBI. We know their control is. So it was like that whole thing, right? So like, okay. It's an interesting drama. And then the next thing, the guy's reading the news, okay? He doesn't have it his own news. He's just reading reports. He goes, here's an interesting story, and I'm going to make up the name, but it was really close to this. The Witches and Devils Association has formally endorsed the Biden-Harris campaign because they feel this is to be the best campaign to bring about the death of America. And, it's like, I'm thinking, like, what is this, a joke or something like that? But there was a serious show. And then there was some other thing. I can't remember the other one, but it was all about, I was thinking, at the end, I was thinking, I would say if you listen to all this stuff, left or right, if you listen to this kind of stuff all day long.
By the way, that little soundbite is what Nam is going to take out and make into a reel.
Yes.
So we're just going to have on the internet Anuttama saying,
yeah, maybe you should edit that out.
Maybe that should be taken out of context. Just saying, I don't know. But to your point, it
drives people. I live in D.C., and a few years ago, that one guy showed up at a pizzeria or something, or a kid's school, and just with a semi-automatic assault weapon because he'd been hearing so many times that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophilia ring in this building. And it was a pizzeria or something, but the guy was convinced.
Pizzagate. That was the QAnon thing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the whole world is so polarized these days. And I think ISKCON has a role to say to people, hey, let's, calm this down. I go to some things I find really disturbing in Washington, D.C. Sometimes I go to some hearings about, say, some violence in India. And I've seen it doesn't happen every time, but the times that I've been there, it happens. There's a Hindu advocate that will talk about some riot someplace. This is how many Hindus were killed and maimed and houses were burned. And then the Muslim stands up and says, well, this is how many Muslim people were killed or hurt or injured or women were violated. And then the Sikh guy will stand up, and then they all have different numbers. Nobody wants to stand up and say, we're suffering here. The people of this state or this city, and some of our Muslim brothers and Hindus brothers and Christian sisters, but it's become so
It's like I think
polarized.
oppression Olympics or something. It's like everyone's like, we have it the worst,
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And therefore we're justified.
Yeah.
And if you go back in history, who hasn't been victimized? I know like now they have a thing I've noticed maybe the last few years, probably in Princeton, it happened 10 years ago, but they start an event. So before we begin, we want to start out by recognizing this is traditionally the sacred land of the such and such people.
Yeah, land acknowledgments.
Yes,
sure.
land acknowledgement about, which native tribe was living here before we took it from them and killed everybody. So like, well, that's nice in waking people up. But,
With the land that the event is happening on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah, it's
that.
very
Oh, yeah.
common now. I mean, I was at an event, an environmental event in Detroit, and they started the whole thing by saying this was historically the land of, I think, the Iroquois tribes, and we call it the conferences, 7 conferences or something. I don't know much of the history of the Native people. And then New York, and then in Canada I was in something, and they started say, well, let's begin by recognizing. Which is kind of important, I mean, for a lot of reasons, but one of which is don't think this is our space. It's funny sometimes because people think like, whatever, I'm a white Anglo-American and this is our land, and why are all you other people coming here? Well, excuse me, you got in because they changed the laws a few years ago to allow your ancestors in. I mean, putting aside the current political debates, but just the mentality.
Yeah.
It's it just leads to more and more conflict.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so one of the things I'm interested in is, and it kind of ties back, I think, to what you were saying in terms of what drew you towards Krishna consciousness to begin with, right? And that there's got to be something more, and that quest for truth and all of those wonderful ideals. And then you end up in a religious institution. And in your case, you end up serving in the communications ministry and serving as a leader and helping to train leaders in that institution. So you're really in the thick of things institutionally.
Trying.
And
I think it's got good values, and I'm trying to uplift them.
But you're still, there's so much institutional bureaucratic stuff, right? It's like you sort of, and I think we talked about this with Madan Gopal a little bit also, where you set out looking for kind of transcendence and spirituality, and all of a sudden you're enmeshed in this this world of institutions and organizations.
I was at a little home program in New Jersey last night, and one of the women there, she asked, how do we avoid complacency? And I asked her, I said, you want the easy answer or you want the hard answer? She said, give me the hard answer. I said, you avoid complacency by, some people don't like the word, but simple, one-word answer, by preaching. Because if you're actually involved with the world and you see how much suffering is going on, you can't be complacent. How can you be complacent? You're driving down the road, you hear an ambulance go by. Well, okay, I'm sorry they interrupted my listening to my kirtan or my favorite radio station or whatever. But no, actually, that's a person on the way to the hospital, and it's going to impact about 20 different lives. And think about what that means, like that. So I think, and I think, that famous exchange with Prabhupada and Giriraj Maharaj in the middle of the night, just before, a few days before Prabhupada left the world, and he called Giriraj Maharaj in, and do you think it'll go on? And Maharaj said, yes, if we're sincere, if we chant, and Prabhupada didn't have much strength, so he didn't say much. But then after a moment, he said, organization and intelligence.
Organization and intelligence, yeah.
So I think, that's a part of it. I mean, that's a big part of it, is that we have to organize our efforts, right? We have to organize our efforts. And anytime you bring an organization together, you're going to run into all kinds of human frailty. It's just the fact. I mean, look at the American political system. Again, it's like, I mean, I read something recently, they were saying that part of the problem now is that people always had differing political opinions, but now at a higher percentage than ever, it's not just that those people are wrong, they're bad for the country. They don't agree with me, they're bad for the country.
Right.
So those opinions, that polarization may be coming, but still we have to try to do our best. I mean, if you want to go visit a family member in Maine, you have to get a car, and you have to get the tires, make sure they work, and you have to change the oil, and you have to put gas in the tank, and you have to get a GPS or get a map or something and plan where you're going to stay and Make sure you have cash and credit cards. A lot of organizations take a weekend.
This is why I don't visit any of my relatives in Maine.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
You can come to Washington. It's very short. It's a shorter distance.
Shorter trip.
It's easy. Yeah. But there has to be organization.
But is it a necessary evil? Is that what you're saying, or?
I wouldn't say. I would say necessary. It's necessary. It is necessary, and because of human frailties, there's going to be mistakes, and there could be some evil that comes up.
Yeah.
So we have to be on our guard. But
because I don't want to be snarky. I mean,
no,
you know I do like being snarky, but I'm trying not to be snarky.
Okay. You can be snarky.
But I'm remembering, like, even the story that you told about kind of being so disillusioned in college after you worked so hard, and then you kind of hit this bureaucratic wall where there was like, no, we never told you, but there's this whole, other structure in place and all this change that you were trying to affect. And I can't help but notice there's a little irony, because now there's a lot of devotees who would probably describe their interactions with ISKCON leadership and GBC in very similar terms, right? They're like trying to affect some kind of change and do something positive. And, here's this like bureaucratic structure that just doesn't get it. And, there's a resolution passed and then it's taken back a year later and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so, I mean, have you become one of the bureaucrats that you used to rail against? Sorry, that's maybe a little snarkier.
Yeah, no, that's but maybe look at it broader, maybe just not that specific thing. We're going to support some system one way or the other, whether we like it or not. Not getting involved is supporting another system. It just is. It's supporting a system of letting responsibility fall upon the heads of other people who may be well-intentioned, maybe not, maybe capable, maybe not. But I think that a story I like, you and I maybe have talked about this before. I think it's Covey, one of those people, Stephen Covey, about a man, two friends were walking along the beach, and there was a huge storm the night before, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of starfish that are washed up on the beach. So as they're walking along, talking to one man, every so often bends down, picks up a starfish, throws it back in the water where it can live. Otherwise, it's destined to die. Every, 10 steps, picks up, throws it up. At one point in time, his friend says to him, "Why are you doing that? There's so many starfish here. There's no way you can't make a difference. There's too many." So his friend bends down, picks up another starfish, throws it in the water, says it made a difference to that one.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, like it's our nature to be active. If we don't get involved, then that's making a decision itself. I mean, Arjuna said, "Krishna, I'm out of here. This is a lose-lose situation. There's like bad guys on all sides, and you're kind of asking me to act badly to participate in this." So Krishna's changed his perspective a little bit. And at the end, he says, "Arjuna, no, you got to act. Choose a way to act. Even if you don't act, you're going to act anyway." So I think that's the general thing, which is that we have to try to, we're going to do something. And as devotees, we realize that we got a lot of help from other people, so let me try to help. And then there's the bigger, I think, the snarky question. So how do we not just become part of the problem? Well, that we have to create a culture which is open, which is as best we can. It's open, it's transparent, it's accountable. Now, are we accountable? Are we transparent? That's a reasonable discussion. What are we doing to make sure? But if we agree those are the principles, then we have to try to get involved one way or the other, try to help. And it's like, okay, Krishna, I surrender. I want to check out of all this crazy material structural establishment that doesn't work with all these crooked people. It's like, okay, great. You really want to surrender? Yeah, I want to surrender. Okay, try to do it in a better way. Well, can I surrender in another way? No. That's what's needed. Okay, I guess so. I'll try what I can. And I think that's what motivates most. I don't know every leader in this government. I think that's what motivates most people to take on responsibility. It's probably a little mixed for most of us, maybe all people who take on some leadership in whatever capacity. But I think we have to be ever endeavoring to, create a better system. I don't think we can say no system. The system's got problems. We can't say no system. And that's something I find a little discouraging sometimes because, it's always, they say, talk like echoing my father, my grandmother here, it's like, it's a lot easier to tear things down than it is to build things up. okay? But that's not an excuse why you can't point out faults and flaws. If somebody has to do that. And at the same time, you have to try to make a difference. And I just give a personal example if I can. I realize I'm giving long answers.
That's fine. No, that's
okay.
absolutely fine.
Like I remember 1996, and for these days, you say 96, and like half the people in the room go, "Oh, that's before I was born." But, you know, for me, it wasn't that long ago. 1996, Manoram Prabhu, who was the youth minister, arranged for 10 or 12 former Gurukula students to speak to the North American leadership. Very pivotal point in history.
Yeah.
And out of those, I think 10, 9 out of 10 had been abused in the Gurukul. They were supposed to make a 30-minute presentation. As I recall, it went on for about 2 hours. And there was probably 80 to 100 North American leaders there. The whole room was in tears. I can still see one or two leaders like walking up and saying, you know, let me offer my obeisances to these kids, because they went around one at a time and told their stories. Horrible stories, gut-wrenching stories. And I think everybody kind of response was, we never knew. We thought it was supposed to be really good. You know, we saw the movies of you guys having fun playing in the dust of Vrindavan and with the calves' tails and all those kind of things. We thought that's what it was all about.
Yeah.
So, you know, at the end of that time, a lot of people said we're sorry and, you know, whatever. And just as an example, it's not such an important example, but it's an example. I'm there. I'd recently moved from Denver, where I was the temple president. I'd moved to the East Coast, and my wife and I had started a business trying to finance communications. We had a small business. We're making a little bit of money. And I just stood up and said, I don't know what I can do, but I want to pledge $10,000 to try to help. Somehow or other, can we help? And a couple of the senior devotees approached me afterwards and said, that's actually like a lead gift, I think is the term. Let's do a big fundraiser and get something going. So out of that meeting, Children of Krishna was created to provide funding for the, you know, for youth. And that went on for about 10 years and raised a few $100,000. Out of that, eventually 2 years later, the Child Protection Office came. And I give that as an example of, and there's probably hundreds of examples like that, maybe thousands, of how you just got to step up sometimes and just do what you can do to try to make a difference. And then, you know, you may do some stuff that, you know, needs to be fine-tuned down the road to do better. But I think that's critical. I think it's really important. And as far as like, you know, GBC and people feeling, sometimes you hear, well, you know, is the GBC relevant? Is the GBC making a difference? One thing, the GBC has done a really lousy job of communicating who they are and what they're about. And I remember you and I talking about this 10 years ago.
I remember that.
I really feel, and I've never done it, but you know, if you took a survey of all the individual members of the GBC and asked people, what do you think about them? Like kind of 1, like this guy's nonsense, to a 10, like, oh my goodness, this is Jesus incarnate, or, you know, something a little more reasonable than those extremes. But I think on all the individual GBC members, probably individually, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe.
We talked about this exactly.
We talked
We talked this with Madan Gopal. We were saying on an individual level, when we talked to GBC members, such nice devotees, so sincere. Yeah. But then as a collective, somehow it becomes something else.
Yeah, what do you think as a collective it would score?
A 2
good question.
A 2 or 3.
A 2?
Wow. Coming
That's
from
low.
Yeah.
2 or 3. Well, yeah, I'm trained to be critical. I go to anti-cult meetings, you know. Yeah. I learned a few things. So, yeah, but a huge difference between that, which makes no sense, okay? And what that means is that the individuals, people have contact with individuals, they know what they're doing, they feel comfortable with them, they're willing to forgive whatever little character flaws are there.
Right.
But collectively, they don't know what they're doing, which is why I've been advocating for 10 years, and I should have pushed a lot harder. The GBC, it wasn't you, it was not me, needs a communications person to tell people what's going on. So we now have one. As of about 3 months ago.
A dedicated communications person
for the GBC. They've created an executive, I'm not sure, director with 4 people. I don't know all of them, but the ones that I know are really good people. And one of the jobs has been given to Parijata Devi Dasi, who's based in Mumbai, to be the communications person for the GBC, to let the world know, what are these people talking about? What are they doing? Why are they doing that? What are what are the internal differences and debates? What are going on? How does it work? Who are these different people? And I think, you know, if you don't put a face on things, in this time and age, the first impression is suspicion, isn't it? You just go right to negativity. You know, you hear there's a new drugstore on the corner. They're probably ripping people off. You don't immediately think, oh, that'll be great. I bet they have wider aisles than the other store, right? You don't think like that. Your mind just goes negative.
Yeah.
So I think the GBC's really failed in that, in getting the information out. And my personal conviction is that, to speak about the governing body commission for Munis, is very sincere, very dedicated people with some very different ideas. I mean, there's definitely, you pick a topic, there's conservative voices, there's liberal voices, there's people who are advocates for this constituency more just naturally within ISKCON or with that constituency. People have this experience or that experience, and they wrestle with things.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say, well, they change their opinion on stuff. Sometimes they change their opinion on stuff because you just get more information, right? You make it as, you can't go forever and get perfect information. So based on what you know, you make a decision. And sometimes they change those decisions. I think some of the recent decisions, pausing one or two things, I've gone on record around the world, I'm not a support of, but I can understand why, and hopefully the correct answer will still come out, as it has several times already.
You're speaking about chocolate, right?
Chocolate, that's chocolate. Yeah.
That's the one?
Yeah, I'm kidding.
I know. I was playing along with that.
Oh, sorry. You can never tell. Because there was a time. Where that was like, it felt like, at least.
I think
maybe I was just sheltered.
The one I hear more about is like Radhe is the one I hear more about.
I think that was a guideline, actually.
The chocolate
one? Yeah, I don't think it's a law.
But I miss the, people talk about, again, not to get too political.
I don't remember that either. Like, apparently I was on the GBC when that was discussed. I don't remember that. I was like, come on, can we get on to something serious here?
I remember it very vividly. It was like...
Now, I tell you, the Radhe part.
Yeah.
It, as I recall... we're a big international organization, and Prabhupada definitely encouraged creativity. I was just rereading the Lilamrita, 26th Avenue. Some people found the insides of an old piano. They brought it to the temple. Prabhupada was happy. Yeah, great place to play along with the tunes. And it's mentioned in the same couple paragraphs. But if you played cartels off time, Prabhupada would stop and correct you.
Right.
So there's certain things that are lots of latitude for creativity and individuality. There's certain things, nope, you got to stick with it.
Yes.
On that. So I think some of the kirtan things, it's like, for example, nice example. A few years ago, there was a kind of heightened awareness and activity of the deity ministry. Okay, and now it's the point, if you want to install deities, you got to go through a whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
How many brahmanas do you have? How much financial support do you have? How big is your pujari room? All these kind of things. Somebody may think, well, come on, this is just our bhav. Like our community wants to worship Radha Krishna. What are you getting in the way with your bureaucracy for?
Yeah.
Well, because if you've got basically abandoned deities in different parts of the world, and people are not worshiping the deities according to the standards that Prabhupada gave and our acharyas give, well, then you got to tighten those things down a little bit. So in a similar way, so that's definitely happened with the deity ministry. Rather than, hey, everybody, did you hear there's Radha Krishna deities installed over here and an official ISKCON center that has 3 devotees, and now they're supposed to do whatever, 6 or 7 artiks a day and dress the deities twice a day, and that's not going to happen, and we know you can commit a lot of offenses with Radha Krishna. So we're going to have so same thing with kirtan. I think it was a sense of, whoa, a lot of creativity going on out there. Like, is the Hare Krishna mantra still going to be active in the Hare Krishna movement? Are we going to forget the priorities?
Yes.
Like, I myself...
Yes, we're going to forget the priorities, or yes, you're just...
No, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing.
Because I don't know where you stand on it. I'm curious.
So I think that's just some of the, so have some guidelines for those kind of things.
I like those guidelines. And the older I get, the more conservative I get about things. And I like that.
Yeah?
I think, you know what it is? I think it's so easy, and I think it's fashionable to hate on the GBC these days. And
for sure.
It's always been like that. Since I remember as a kid, true. Even like, they're like the overlords and this and that. But now as I get older, I'm trying to understand like why devotees do what they do and why the GBC does what they do, and it's understandable. ISKCON is not small. ISKCON is so huge. There's so many centers. You have to have some kind of like,
right. It can't just be the wild west. There has to be some kind of uniformity or standards. Or no, I get that. I guess what I struggle with is, and I like kirtan as an example. I can see the value in making sure that sort of basic foundations are not lost. But when you've got elements like the chanting of Radhe Radhe, which is such a part of our larger tradition, it just seems weird to me to like come down heavy on that. Like the optics of it, like I think were really kind of bad at the time. But then also it just feels like it's almost like what's that expression, like trying to be more Catholic than the Pope. It's like
probably in part because there was no communications person to say, this is a discussion that's going on for 6 months. We heard from A, B, and C on the left and D, E, and F
there's
on
no
the
context.
right. And we kind of debated it and discussed it. And, it was a 60-40 vote. And the reason why they did this is because of concerns over that. And, we hope everybody understands we're trying to kind of keep community together and do the best we can.
Yeah.
I think that's whereas you just kind of read it like, whoa, you can't do this anymore. You have to do this now, and then you don't get the context of it all, and that makes it seem a little oppressive. But it shouldn't.
I feel like,
hopefully that's what Parijata and this whole office is going to help.
Yeah, like they're I saw on the YouTube channel they're recording the meetings now. So if you want to sit in on the meeting, you can actually watch it.
The C-SPAN version. We were talking
Gopal
about
this.
The GBC meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what Madan Gopal said. Maybe he just has like a hidden camera.
No. I saw it.
Might be a hidden camera.
No, I saw it.
You saw it.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, I was.
It's probably one of the most boring things you've ever watched.
The sound was.
That's the other thing. I think
don't
there's
get your viewers like too fired up because I don't think that's the case. Because every single time they start a GBC meeting, we get told about confidentiality and turn on your cameras because we need to know who's there. We need to know who's in the room.
I'll find it for you, Prabhu. It's
whoever. I think that's be news to me.
Wow.
Although I think some of the things should be more. I mean, definitely reports have to be more public and this and that.
I think maybe it's like reports instead of like it's everything.
Straight meeting. All the meetings were there. On YouTube.
Wow.
Of the global GBC, not the North American GBC.
No, of the global GBC. The one that just happened in Mayapur.
Oh,
wow.
Okay. Parts of it, maybe.
Yeah. but you
know, was panicking right now. He's like, excuse me, I have to make a quick phone call. What's going on?
I should have known this.
But the Radhe Radhe thing is like more peripheral. But when it gets kind of hairy is when it's like, for example, the female Diksha Guru thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, can be gurus. Okay, now they can't be gurus. Now they can be gurus again. And it's like, what's going on? Like, it's a little bit like kind of haphazard.
The GBC is 35 individuals who are doing their very best to try to figure out how to lead the movement with their different cultural backgrounds, their different spiritual experiences, spiritual training, different parts of the world they represent. They are definitely subject to different influences. We all are.
Right.
We all are. And, I personally think that decision to delay the whole thing the last time around was a mistake. I voted against it. I spoke against it. But, I'm a member of a larger organization, and I got to go with the majority.
Yeah.
And there's other decisions where I felt weren't necessarily ones that I would make, but I live in a larger society, and I have to kind of go along with those and pick the things where I think I can actually make a difference. And so
I think it's commendable that you said like, oh, I didn't agree with it, but you weren't like, oh, I'm going to resign because I don't agree with this.
Thought about it.
Do you have a resignation letter like in a draft folder ready to go? No, I'm dead serious.
No, I'm dead serious. I don't.
You don't?
No,
because that's
but I'm in writing. I could probably write
I did.
I could write one in a hurry.
I did, and I think I did send it to you at some point. I had to. No, but I mean that's a real thing, right? Because I'm wondering for you, have you thought about that there's going to be a point where it's like,
hang
up
the gloves.
I'm getting up there. I mean, Prabhupada got in the Jala Duty was 69. I'm 69.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think that's one thing, maybe just as a segue. I mean, there's a lot of things going on at the GBC level and upper echelons of ISKCON leadership now to kind of prepare for the future. I mean, we've created a whole nother stratum of leadership called zonal supervisors,
right?
Which is between the temple president and the GBC.
Right.
Looking at North America, actually the whole world is trying to align in what were contiguous zones. I mean, I always think of His Grace Gopal Krishna Maharaj as a great, wonderful soul, but just an example, because I know what his turf was West India, East Africa, which don't exactly border each other,
right.
Russia,
Right.
And then I guess if you go over the Arctic Circle, you get to Canada.
Canada, yeah.
I mean, that was the zone. And I don't know the history, but probably because something happened, they needed somebody to step in, and he was known and loved. And Mirage, can you take this? But to get to the point, say, in North America now, there's a North Zone, which is basically Canada and a few of the states in kind of the Central Plains, Montana, North Dakota, like that. Then there's a Northeast, which are trying to get there, 1 GBC. A Southeast, Central, and West. So it's partially aligned so far. So there's a couple interim steps. So we're moving towards that. And within, say, the Northeast, there might be 4, 5, 6 for now. Later, 20 zonal supervisors working under and helping the 1 GBC person, because as we get bigger, maybe there's 500 temples in the Northeast United States within 100 years or so. So adding another layer of structure. And definitely GBC is talking a lot about succession now, and how do we train the next level of people, who's ready to come up, what are the processes. I'm on what's called the GBC Nominations Committee, establishing policies, how do we bring names forward, what's the vetting process for them, should there be...
For GBCs.
For GBCs, yeah. Like, for instance, here's an example of changing decisions. GBC looked at what's the whole process of getting new members and decided we're going to do all this total review, and then once you get on, you're on. But the nominations committee is seriously considering that there were advantages to at least part of the former system, which was you go all through the process, but then you're still on a trial basis for a couple of years.
Right.
Because sometimes people might have a great resume, but when they get in that room, they don't perform as well. It's just not what they're cut out for. So there should be some respectful methodology of saying, well, you're a wonderful devotee, and thank you very much, and you've done great things, but at this point, this really isn't the best thing for you.
Because what's a qualification?
So to the discussion about changing that, maybe back to what we had before.
Yeah, because what is the, not what is a qualification in terms of, on paper, but what makes for a good GBC, right? It's not just something that a resume will tell you. It's not just something that one's devotional accomplishments or achievements or services performed will tell you. So how do you even begin to sort of suss that out?
Yeah, we have to have the nominations committee leads come on sometime to get into the details. But
it's like a je ne sais quoi. Like what is that? What's that quality that makes someone?
Well, some people will say they're enthusiastic, they can inspire others, and they know how to preach. Or I prefer outreach as a term. Some people will say the most important thing is they set their own spiritual example for others to follow. Some people will say that, different roles. Like I personally think to be effective as a GBC member, you have to have some ability in team building. You have to be able to work with the presidents and people
unifying.
Yeah.
Unifying. And I personally feel, and maybe just because it's my nature, but I think that GBC people should be first and foremost able to kind of coach and uplift the local leadership. Prabhupada wanted temple presidents to be the leader of their community.
Totally,
he didn't want the GBC to run the show. Just supposed to be the check and balance on certain things. So, and I think a GBC member definitely has to have a high degree of teammanship to work as a collective body.
Yeah.
And you've got to be ready for the give and take that comes there. You've got to be ready to kind of present your perspective and some of the people, the communities that you represent, and as best you can. So.
Remember on report cards, there used to be that works well with others.
Yeah.
There's got to be a works well with others checkbox thing, right?
I asked, I had told some of my friends that you were coming on, and someone had a question that I thought was really nice. And a good question. Really curious about how the GBC approaches leadership change, not only at the highest levels, but also at the temple and congregational level. Why is it that there are rarely any visibility into ISKCON temple leadership, and that the congregation lacks a voice or power or seat at the table to remove local authorities, even higher level ones?
TP, temple presidents and stuff
TPs,
like that.
just like, or a vote, we always hear about like voting and stuff, but like I've never voted on anything ever.
But there's there are no temple elections, right? That's not how.
That's not a thing, right?
That's not a thing.
The GBC itself votes for new people.
The GBC members vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's now, there's the GBC body, then there's regional bodies, which have limited authority and they're in charge of their area. So North American leaders, GBCs, temple presidents, people on that level have been meeting for 40 years, more or less unofficially, although it was official, but it wasn't, stamped approval kind of a thing. So just over the last year, the North American regional governing body became the official body representing North America to the GBC. And we created our own structure. So the structure is 5 GBCs from those 5 areas, although it's still in transition. And I'm going to get back to some, kind of put the context.
Sure.
5 GBC members, 5 temple presidents elected by the temple presidents of that zone. So one from the Northeast, one from Southeast, like that. So there's elective presentation. 5 zonal supervisors chosen by the GBC, so one zonal supervisor from each area. So 5 GBCs, 5 zonal supervisors, 5 temple presidents, and then some ministers, youth ministry, Vaishnavi ministry, communications ministry, and then there may be some other advisors, like we recently brought in just last week, an official legal advisor to the North American RGB, which we never had in the past. So these things, it may be hard to, why so long, but we're getting more structure, in part because GBC members and others are saying, hey, we're not going to be around that much longer. We can't do a lot of things ad hoc. We can't just turn it over without having some systems in place. We need to build better systems. So in answer to part of the question, there's what's called the GBC College for Leadership now, which some people have misunderstood means you go to there if you want to be a GBC member. No, it's the GBC putting together some leadership training. It's a 1-year course, I think 10 or 14 days.
Even though you've been a GBC for so long, you attended that.
I took it, yeah. In fact, when I went, I taught a course, and then the next day I sat down and went back to being a student again. You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, so definitely wanted to improve training. I mean, we did a course about 15 years ago, ISKCON Leadership and Management course, and we brought together leading educators, leading managers from around the world, from India, from North America, from Europe, came together to create a course, a 24-hour course of leadership principles. At college, I mean, you take a 24-hour course, that's at least a semester or two, right? It's like, you go an hour and a half a week for 15 weeks. It's so it's pretty substantial. So a lot more training putting in place. And I was recently at a temple visiting, and an elder gentleman who was a member came up and asked me, said, you're the GBC, you should have an ISKCON every temple you visit. Because otherwise, you just go and you people talk to the temple president. You don't talk to anybody else. You don't know what's happening on the ground.
Right.
I thought, whoa, okay, that's a pretty good advice. So, personally, I'm going to try to do that at least once a year when I visit places, to try to do that.
Right.
So would that be kind of the seat at the table that this question is getting at? I mean, think that would help?
I think. Well, in part, he's saying, how come we don't have a voice?
Yeah.
So I think they should. In Philadelphia, as an example, one of the temples in my GBC responsibilities, we announce, the board of directors, the term is ending and there's 2 positions open. If you'd like to come forward, here's the job description, put your name forward. So we look to the congregation. Some people that come forward, frankly, it's like, well, come on, that person hasn't done anything in 15 years and we don't really think they're suited for that. So it ends up the board still chooses the next person, but the board is going out and actively soliciting people to put their names forward. And it's brought up some good new people have come forward to participate.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure. It's an interesting point because, in fact, one of the legal cases has been involved in recently in North America. Prabhupada clearly created a top-down organization. Prabhupada was the founder chairman. He empowered the GBC as the ultimate managing authority. He created temple presidents and all that. At the same time, he wanted creativity, he wanted individuality, he wanted local autonomy in a lot of things. But, when push comes to shove, we're not the Baptists. Right. You don't gather everybody on a Sunday night after the feast and say, hey, we're throwing out the GBC, we're throwing out this and that. And by the way, we're moving Prabhupada's Murti out if we choose to do so. And we're going to rename the deities, or whatever. Could be good ideas or terrible ideas. That's not the way Prabhupada structured. He could have, but he didn't do that.
That structure, by the way, is borrowed from the Ramakrishna Mission and the Vedanta Society, right? I mean, I don't
know so much the details.
As far as I understand,
with the governing body and
really? And I think it might have been because there's so much happening in Bengal at that time. I think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, although was very markedly critical theologically, right? So they were theologically very, very different, but I think very much appreciated the sort of structure and framework and the logistics of the Ramakrishna
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
it's an efficient system.
Yeah. In a bigger sense, our whole theology is everything belongs to Krishna. Everything should be used for Krishna.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm not going to go to the Hare Krishna car dealership to buy a car designed, built, paid for by the Hare Krishna entrepreneurs. We don't have one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go wherever I can.
I'd be
get
worried
it.
about that car, by the way.
I would
I would not want to drive
car.
that car.
No. But I go and I get a car that I use for me and my family in Christian service. So I mean, there's so many things we take. I mean, these microphones and the video, we didn't make these video cameras.
But meaning it's a leadership structure that
subtle and gross. We can use things in this
we
world that are can be used for
but it's top down.
Yeah.
It's top down.
We're not
let's
Baptist.
Not pretend
we're
not.
like the Western thing. We're more the Catholic model.
Can I push back a little bit on
say no.
You can say no. I mean,
kidding.
it's fair.
Continue, sorry.
But I think it's worth exploring, and I'm not sure quite how to articulate this. But I think what I'm trying to ask is this: everything we're talking about rests on this assumption that seems to be very temple based. And here's the challenge: more and more, I think a case can be made that dynamic Krishna Bhakti, Krishna consciousness, the Hare Krishna, wider Hare Krishna movement, whatever you want to call it,
community-based.
Is community-based, maybe not even community-based, but it's just is not temple-based. It's individuals, it's social media.
Yeah, and what percentage of people self-identify as Hare Krishna devotees live in Hare Krishna temples?
Yeah.
Or even,
small.
I would even push farther,
Okay.
forget living in Hare Krishna, but even identify primarily with a particular geographic temple.
Okay.
Right? You've got places like, and I mean, we're in New Jersey. There's some wonderful temple communities in New Jersey. Devotees really strongly identify with those temples. Okay, that's great. But I think there's a lot of devotees, and maybe I would even put myself in that category, where it's, I'm inspired by different projects, and it may not necessarily be where I'm geographically based, and it may not necessarily be a formal temple building, Sure. And so for those of us who are outside of that
especially
sort of
in this day and
temple,
age, because you're just connected through social media
You
and
can
everything
connect.
else all around the world. You're not limited by
Like
Yeah.
the wisdom of the sages, people, some of them don't
Yeah.
even visit temples.
Yeah.
But yet there's a whole group of those people who are consider
vibrant
themselves Hare
community.
Krishna devotees.
and they're growing in faith, and they're doing all the things, right? They're going through all the steps from Shraddha to, right? So here's the kind of the challenge is like, how much of any of this stuff is relevant to folks who are like, okay, that works for temples, right? So GBC, I guess it makes sense that, you need structure, you need a way to legislate, institutions and organizations and temples. But like, at the end of the day, if I'm not connected to a temple, how does that show up in my life, right? And I'll use admittedly a sort of low stakes, cheeky example, right? Let's not talk about the female Diksha Guru thing just yet, but let's say the whole chocolate thing, right? Let's say, the GBC comes out with, a final ruling that like chocolate is, this was the language that was used when I was growing up, bona fide, not bona fide, right? Bogus, bona fide.
hypothetical example.
Hypothetical example.
Okay.
The GBC says chocolate is not bona fide. How in the world is anyone going to enforce that on me? Private citizen who goes to the store and buys like a chocolate bar or whatever, right? Like, in other words, what does that have to do with
We're
me?
going to put a camera in your car and in every store across the entire world and watch and monitor and see what you get away with.
And then what?
Then the Yamadutas.
And then I'm going to get flogged?
There's a special planet for chocolate eaters, probably. I don't know. It's in the 13th canto.
But you get my point of the question,
yeah,
right?
so here's a more relevant thing, okay? I'm a person I'm Wisdom of the Sages or whatever. I'm participating. I go to Rath Yatra festivals. I like it. At a certain point in time, I may, through my study of the books, I want to get a guru. Okay, I want to get a guru. Now, we know that's definitely part of the system. We all believe it's part of the system, should be part of the system. Prabhupada wanted there to be other gurus. And if we're going to be part of the broader Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there's different branches of Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in America. You can follow this one and this one and this one. ISKCON's the biggest at this point. If you're going to choose a guru, whatever you're doing, you are giving a significant amount of power to that guru. You're giving a lot of power to that guru. Unless you could be giving a lot of power to that guru.
You mean me as an individual, as a disciple.
As an individual. And from my side of the fence, I've seen a lot of people been abused by the gurus, one way or the other, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, whatever. It just happens, fathers, let's face it, authorities abuse people sometimes. we still need authority. I mean, you're at a big university. I'm sure you've had a fair number of professors over the years. I don't know. I don't follow the newspaper. They got revealed and thrown out. It happens all the time in the military. They just fired so many people from the Air Force Academy, and Michigan State. I went to Michigan State University, and like the guy that was like the coach of some of the women's teams. The total abuse. The doctors. My God, a doctor.
That was the biggest case.
Huge
case.
Huge.
That was Michigan State.
Michigan State, and not only Michigan State. A lot of places. Yeah. So I think that in part you need authorities to provide checks and balance on authorities, and if you don't have checks and balance on authorities, then in this day and age, people can exploit their authority. So I think that in terms of relevance, practicality, I think the GBC more and more should be creating some policies and systems to create a healthy environment for people to practice, to help people practice Krishna consciousness according to their own inspiration. That's very welcoming, very flexible, and at the same time, we talked about earlier, trying to say, if you're at all affiliated with ISKCON, these are some standards that we have. If you're going to get initiated, we know that this guy has at least, or she has at least this minimum qualifications.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to a Hare Krishna temple, these are some things we're still trying to get in order. But we can guarantee you that they have bylaws written in lines with Srila Prabhupada. We have a methodology of taking out that president if they, let's say removing the president, let's say replacing the president. Gotta be careful. I'm in New Jersey. I gotta watch my language up
Taking
here.
Out.
Yeah.
We got a way to take him out.
We got a way to take out that guy. So, you have some systems in place that protect us. And we know in this is day and age, you can abuse a lot of stuff, right? Sure. I grew up in the generation of pacifying the villages. You guys are maybe too young for the language. That's the language the U.S. military used in Vietnam. Yeah. We're pacifying the villages. A lot of time meant they napalm the whole place. Yeah. It's okay. So that's a danger. But we need systems because the nature of the human being is we need some checks and balances on each other. So I think the governing body more and more will be creating guidelines and policies to help enhance our Krishna consciousness, that at the same time simultaneously encourage individuality. And we have different temples today, they have different moods, different gurus have different moods, different GBC members have different. No, that's all good. That's healthy. That's good. But we still need some kind of, I thoroughly believe, some kind of checks and balances.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
I think so. I guess the question behind the question is, and maybe this is just something that I'm personally struggling with. It's like, how am I a member of ISKCON? Like, how do I know I'm a member of ISKCON? Is it through my initiation? Is it because my guru is a guru in good standing in ISKCON? Like, you know what I mean? Like at a certain point, especially as I've gotten older, it's like, well, I'm a practitioner of this. I identify as a practitioner of this faith. Mm-hmm. I take a lot of inspiration at ISKCON temples and from ISKCON leaders, and I hear from them. But yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a really kind of concrete way of identifying like what it means to be a member of this organization.
Yeah. And does that even need to be?
Does there even need to be?
Yeah.
I think these are all some of the kind of things that are in transition right now.
Because at one time it was easy to answer those questions, right? It was like you were in or you were out.
Like you have a 14-year-old daughter?
14, yeah.
So it's like, am I an adult or am I a little kid?
Oh.
What am I? And does my mommy and daddy still tell me everything I'm supposed to do? Do I even like calling them mommy and daddy? Do I want my friends to know that I have a mommy and daddy and make rules for me? Right. It's like all those different kind of things. So I think that ISKCON is very much in transition. We went from being very much almost like a cloistered organization that went out to, distribute books like falling from the sky like bombs, like Prabhupada said sometimes. We went from that to in a brahmacharini-based organization to grahastas, very much cloistered around the temple, to a much more expansive congregation, to, through social media and all these things, to people in all kinds of pockets where there aren't, as you said, aren't even temples.
Yeah.
How do we accompany that? We don't even have specific structures, which I think the North American RGB is going to make it a priority over the next couple of years. How do you go from like two families in New Jersey or wherever that like to identify as Christian devotees? How do we help them organize themselves in such a way they can take advantage of the resources of the larger community? Are there senior teachers, sannyasis, or somebody that can maybe visit them once in a while? Do we have like topics for them to talk about when they have a home program? Do we have recipes for them to take advantage of? Do we have recommendations about, hey, don't try to rent the school because they have too many, when you reach a certain size, they're going to have too many rules, but go to the firehouses. We don't have structures. It's all like do your own thing. And so we need, again, I guess I'm a systems guy. We need information that can be shared.
So you're seeing ISKCON as an institution as, I'm hearing you position it more as like, they're resources for you, not this is an organization and we're going to oversee what you're doing and we're going to
Oh, that's really interesting.
But it kind of flips it around, right? It's like saying like, hey, like we have resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're here to facilitate you in your practice.
Well, an example of that, like this regional governing body, what we're talking about is for the first time, the North American temples have all committed to give a percentage of their gross income to support a national body. Previously, every temple gave a few $100s or something like that, but now it's like a percentage. And it was decided 1%. I hope that pans out well. It's the first year. Some temples at the recent meeting said, hey, we should give 5%. We kind of passed out and said, how much you want to give? Some just to get a feeling of it. Some said 5, some said 3, some said 1. So I said, okay, let's start with 1. And it's very much understood that those local, to start with the structured, talk about individuals later. Okay, we're giving 1%. What are we going to get out of this? Well, hopefully you're going to get you're going to get advice from the legal office if you need it. You're going to get resources from the educational office. If you need some help with your communications work, it's going to be a little more facilities for you there. Architecturally, and we all know this is kind of like the era of building temples. Everybody goes out and hires an architect and starts from scratch. And maybe they talk to somebody about where you get your kitchen equipment. But it's not like you go to some central place and you get, okay, here's like 6 different options of structures and architect. Take your pick.
Here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't worked. Here's what you want to avoid.
None of that. None of that. You want to start a restaurant. Where's the source of what seemed to work and what didn't? You call your friends. So those are the kind of resources I think that we need to be providing for the communities and for the individuals as well.
Yeah.
And as we grow, I mean, we're definitely seeing different people. Some people like to come to a temple once a year. Some people like to come once a month. Some people like to come once a day. Some people don't like to go at all. But they send me some books through the BBT, and I'll listen online, and that's where I'm at. Yeah. And the basic principles of chanting and take prasad and associate devotees are still there. And I think ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is meant to help facilitate anyone and everyone according to what's their inspiration.
So it's Big Tent. It's
the Big Tent. Big Tent, big umbrella. I think that's what we're supposed to do.
I want to know more specifically about what the GBC in each region does, because what my experience has been of a GBC is that they come to the temple and make sure that, okay, books are being distributed, the temple's not on fire, there's nothing illegal going on.
In that order. Right? It's like,
and then
books are the basis. Then we'll worry about whether the temple's on fire.
And then we don't see them for the next 1 year or so, and then the same thing the next year. So is there been like an evolution at all of what the GBC does?
Yeah, well, I think the evolution has been, in part, we need additional people in a different category, which is the zonal supervisors, to help and assist in that role. I think the evolution has been, like in North America, we need to create this evolved North American region governing body so that the local temple president or community or board or congregation has more than just the one person who comes once a year to check and to help them.
Right.
So we need help on legal issues. I mean, somebody asked me legal issues. I'm not trained legally. I'm a GBC member. It's not my expertise. Here's the person to talk to.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to know more about kirtan. Okay, well, there's a kirtan ministry, so talk to the kirtan minister. Somebody wants to know more about deity worship and developing. Here's that resource. So that's the idea. So you said in simple terms, but basically the GBC is supposed to visit and supervise and make sure things are going on well. Yeah. But more and more, they should also be the person that helps put you in touch with different kind of resources and make sure you're taking advantage of those. And communications. Are we getting all the information that we need? Like you go to a certain place, say, you guys got a Sunday school? No, we really struggle. Well, there's a place 75 miles away that has a booming Sunday school with 6 classrooms full of kids, and they do 7 plays a year, and the parents love it. And please find out from them what's going on. That's been happening a little bit in the past, certainly, but we need more of that.
When you look at it as a resource, that changes it
changes
so
things,
much.
right? It flips things. Which,
it makes it really
I want to think
palatable
about that a little more.
in some ways.
Yeah, that paradigm shift.
Not that it wasn't palatable, but there was like a...
I'll tell you another thing very, really important for the GBC. I think historically, and you know how you break it down and give the credit, I'm absolutely convinced without the GBC, there would be no International Society for Christian Consciousness, because we would have splintered and split and separated and gone our own ways. Back in the 80s with the zonal acharyas, that would have split us. When Kirtananda went off on the deep end, that would have split us, with the whole response to the Turley suit, that could have possibly split us. Temples came together and said, look, we got a real mess here. We did not protect our children. We need to do the proper thing as best we can, as best we possibly can. We need to come together. We can't let LA Temple close because they happen to be the first ones that were sued, et cetera. We have to work together. And I think especially getting the full circle back to this thing with guru groupism and all that, the tendency to say, hey, this is my guy, to use a colloquial term, this is my guy, we're a little group, we stick together, we don't care about anybody else. That's not the Sankirtan movement. That's not what Lord Chaitanya said. We're supposed to come together collectively, right?
Yeah.
Americans, Russians, Indians, whatever he said, are all going to come together in Mayapur to chant. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, way back when India was a colony of the British Empire, had a global vision for our movement. And Lord Chaitanya said, my name will be chanted in every town and village. So that's a global vision.
Yeah.
And we're somehow, helping to kind of bring that about. And I think I mentioned the group I was talking to yesterday. I think we step back a little bit. It's a super exciting time. Whether we, consider ourselves a, quote, temple devotee or just a member of the broader Krishna conscious movement, to see some of the positive things that are going on. And there's definitely some challenges. There's definitely some problems that still need to be fixed and some systems that need to be fixed and more fine-tuned. But it's a really exciting time. And we live in a time when we see the world is really messed up. I mean, look at the environmental challenges that are there. I went with Gopal Leela, did his presentation at TED Talk in Detroit last year. I mean, wow, you sit through that and say, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. And between that and the political situation and so many problems, exploitation and war. I mean, the wars that are going on. I mean, I don't know how many years this is going to be out there. I'm sure this is such a popular podcast. People only listen to this in 2075, no doubt. So at this very moment, there's the war in Ukraine and in Russia, and then recently Israel and Hamas. And what a mess. So there needs to be some more deeper change and transformation. It's not just going to come through put money here or there, or elect this party, elect that party, or this policy, or that policy. There really needs to be change in consciousness, and I think we've got an important role to play in that.
How do you deal with criticism? Because as a GBC member, you do have you are open for you have a what is it, crosshair on your backs at sometimes
on your forehead.
Yeah.
Well, not just as a GBC member, but then also as a communications minister, as a communicator, right? In some cases, you are literally the voice, the face.
Do you follow anything online or on social media? Because it can get really poisonous online.
I don't follow, but I see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The only exception is the comments to this podcast are always really super nice. Everyone's just really supportive.
You're real
sweet.
snarky today, aren't you?
No one says anything bad about me in particular.
That's good. How could they say anything bad
How
about
could
you?
they?
Come on.
They couldn't even imagine it.
They could say, maybe grow your beard on another 1/8 of an inch so we can see it more clearly, or
right?
Something like that. That would be about it. Who's going to be snarky? I think that we all know this is. Sorry, take from the scripture, right? It's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy.
Yeah,
and you could say quarrel, hypocrisy, and criticism. It's so easy to criticize people. I think that social media and all that, it just makes it so much easier to do. So I think anybody and everybody is vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
I think people have a right to raise questions and concerns, and if we don't, that's where we have problems, and that's where we'll have more problems. And right, if somebody doesn't tell you, you come home and they go, why is all that smoke coming out of the house? You guys, well, I don't have a fireplace. There must be a problem, right? You need people to tell you those things.
Yeah.
So that's there. At the same time, I think sometimes we should be more careful about the way we critique things. I think we definitely get carried away with it. I know in communications in the course that we worked on, we teach if you're going to send an emotional letter, we took this from way back from Dale Carnegie. If you're going to send an emotional letter, wait 24 hours.
Right.
I still use all those wait 24 hours, feedback sandwiches. I use feedback sandwiches as much as possible.
Yeah, it's very important.
And that runs the idea of.
But a lot of times people, I hear about something, I don't like it. I'll be snarky or worse. You fool, you rascal, this is ridiculous, this is offend Prabhupada, this is horrible. Right. Send.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you send it, then it just explodes and makes life worse.
Well, there's also anonymity now, right?
Oh,
there's it used to be that, there was anonymity then too, but it took real effort to get your voice out there. You had to write, a paper, and then this person wrote a paper back, and it was
open letter on Sampradaya San.
Anyone. It's just, a couple of strokes on the keyboard and you're done, or on your phone.
Yeah, you can say anything. So I think you can
say anything, things that you wouldn't dream of saying to someone's face.
To answer your question, I find when I'm getting super criticized from the right and super criticized from the left, I'm probably right about where I ought to be.
That's a good metric.
Really interesting.
And lately, I've experienced that personally.
Wow.
Super critical people that I consider, for lack of a better term, way on the right. God bless them all. Super heavy criticism of me personally, attacks, you could even say. People way on the left, where they would like to identify themselves on whatever opposite end of the spectrum. Super heavy criticisms, which means either you're dirty, rotten to the core. Or you're probably
you're doing something right.
You're probably doing something right.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, if you're only getting criticized somewhere here, maybe I've gone too far this way. I got to think about that a little more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my personal experience on that.
Right.
Yeah, and it's no fun to be criticized, but it comes with the territory. And again, philosophically, read the Gita: the one who is not disturbed, honor, dishonor.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean we can't listen to those things. We don't become hard-hearted, and I don't care what people think, or that's. Now you're isolated, and you can become a little cultic if you're not careful.
Yeah.
But if and a lot of times too, those criticisms, sometimes those criticisms are completely unfounded. Like, this is totally made up.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to let it bother me that much. There may be 150 people saying it, believing it, and putting in a thumbs up, but I know it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
There may be criticisms here. They've completely misunderstood. And at the same time, you have to think, okay, well, maybe... What can I learn from this? Is there something legitimate they've said? Okay, let me take that on board. Mm-hmm. Or at the very least, obviously, we need to communicate better, because why are they thinking like that?
Yeah. I remember one of the communication principles you taught and really exemplified to me was this idea of that we are called to be mirrors, not mouthpieces, right? And this kind of stereotypical PR model of, it's just, to be a mouthpiece for the organization and put out, just put the best face on everything. But no, actually being a mirror and reflecting back. And if there's valid criticism, even if it's given harshly, okay, we can learn from it. And to do that both ways, that's not an easy gig, right? To be a mirror back to the institution, but then also to be able to, kind of face those challenges and criticisms out.
Yeah, I think it's something actually every devotee should do. Because we're all representing Krishna consciousness or ISKCON, however we want to define it, to one degree or the other. So to be able to say, somebody comes up and says, I met one of your people. I know she was one of your people because she had these neck beads you people all wear, and she had like a red dot. I think she's one of your people. And she was the nastiest person I've ever met in the grocery store. And, I think her name was so-and-so, and maybe you should talk to her.
Wow.
So then it's like, okay, I got to apologize to this lady. That's not reflective of who we are. And thank you very much. And you got to go back and find that person, if you know, and say, by the way, you might have had a really bad day. For all I know, somebody just smashed in the back of your car and your husband left you, for all I know. But you can't be dealing with other people like that.
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's also a reminder, too, oh, my gosh, I remember yesterday I was in the grocery store line and I was really, I better do better myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's there, too.
Yeah.
We're at 1 hour and 45 minutes. It was a really great...
Wait a minute. With my contract, you had to quit paying me at 1.5 hours. So we got to cut up. We have to stop the show now.
You get overtime.
Did you want to end with any question or?
So we could go into
I mean,
so
we
many
could go
things.
another few hours. But
I would. I love your stories from the field as far as like the kind of communication save that you've done. And I know we didn't get into a lot of that, but just you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to. I know some things you probably can't talk about.
We don't have time to talk about I was thinking about this morning. What's it like to be arrested in a Santa Claus suit in Aspen, Colorado? One of the most, like, what's the word? Like, was really sophisticated. Cheesy. What's the word?
Shishi.
Shishi. Thank you. We're trying to think of that word for days. One of the most shishi places in the world, where the cops wear blue jeans and drive Saabs. And they arrest you in a Santa Claus suit going door to door to raise money, try to publish some books. And the cop thinks it's so funny, he takes you to the mayor, and they show you off these bald guys, Hare Krishnas, in a Santa Claus suit. And the mayor just says, this is ridiculous. They all have a big, big laugh, and then they tell you, get out of town.
Wow.
So,
true story.
True story.
God. You were one of the Santas?
One of 3 nights in a row that we got arrested. Yeah, this is a long story. Next time.
This is before your communication service.
This is probably why I got into communications.
Yeah, you were like,
wow.
Yeah.
And it was all done with good intention. On one hand, it's like, hey, the Hare Krishnas were representing, we are religious people, spiritual values. Santa Claus represents Christmas and Jesus and the time of giving and the time of knowledge, and God gave his only son and all of that. It should work together. Most people didn't see it like that. So sometimes you do things a little naively and you learn the hard way.
You going to write your memoirs?
I don't know. You told me to once. I don't know.
I think you need
to. If I remember long enough when I have time to do it, we'll see.
You might need to anonymize some things, but I mean, I think the just what you've experienced, what you've seen, it can be invaluable.
Important. Well, thank you, Anuttama Prabhu, for joining us on this conversation.
Was this more fun than Larry King Live?
When Kirtananda called in, or
no, Prabhu was on Larry King.
No, I know you were on that.
Kirtananda didn't call in. It was just some Prabhu someplace.
Well, Kirtananda. So Kirtananda was on Larry King Live as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm bringing up.
Prabhu called in.
Reverend Prabhu called in. Yeah,
but then you were on Larry King Live around the Turley lawsuit, right?
Yes. No, I was on Larry King Live around the court case when we lost a case. I think it was Minnesota or the Lee case. Can't remember. We lost the right to distribute books in airports.
Yes. Oh yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
That was big. That case, I think that
and one of those cases went on. There were still a bunch of airports where we still could distribute books, and somehow there was a wasn't exactly
was LAX the last big case?
I think there still are places. I think devotees to today still distribute books in St. Louis Airport, I believe.
I mean, when I was in law school, though, some of those cases we studied them in class. They were like
really
precedent.
They're still classics.
Yeah.
You study a lot of stuff from the Jehovah's Witnesses from the 40s and what they did for religious freedom and freedom of speech. Hare Krishnas in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. So that's why you were on Larry King.
Yeah, it was Larry King.
How much notice did you get before you?
We were pitching it. We were trying to get.
Oh, you were pitching
attention.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't like a call you got.
No, I got a call. I got a call saying, "Can you be on an airplane at 1:00?" About 9:00 that morning. I said, "Yeah, I can." They said, "Okay, get on the plane. Here's the plane, and we'll have a limousine pick you up. We'll take you to a hotel, and you'll be in the studio by 10:00, and we'll go live." So we were working at it, but we didn't know for sure what was going to happen. So I, jumped on the plane and went. And that was a lot of fun.
So cool.
And I think the most significant part of that whole interview was, for me, a very strong communications lesson. In the break, because there was an interview, he was talking to us, and then there was a break, and then we came back and I think did a second and final section. So, and we're sitting close. We're like about with a little table this far away, maybe closer. So during the break time, I thought, okay, I need to find out what's going on. So I asked him directly. I said, Larry, have you ever met a Hare Krishna in the airport? Because it's all about Hare Krishna's airport. And he said, yes. I thought, okay, let's go, we're going to go for it. I said, how was that experience? He said it was okay. At which point I knew for sure he was going to treat me fairly. And at which point it convinced me every single Hare Krishna devotee in the world, every single person they have a contact with has an impact.
Right.
And if we're rude to people, or we're just, God forbid, we're mean to people, or we're manipulative, or we're fanatical, or we don't respect them, the old stuff that was really long-term harmful, we're gonna suffer reactions for that. And if we treat people like saintly people are supposed to treat people, that's going to, over long term, is going to pay off. And it certainly did in that case because he had a reasonably positive experience with Hare Krishna. He didn't have an axe to grind in front of 11 million people.
Right.
And if he had, and he had a couple phone calls from people that had some axes to grind. So I had to kind of be prepared how to answer them.
Right.
But, the bottom line is sometimes devotees think, well, how am I making a difference? Well, every single time we interact with somebody in the world, we're having an effect upon somebody's life. And they say something to their friends, and it multiplies.
Yes.
So we have a really sacred responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's not just, the one time I say, hey, here's this book, or maybe I'm chanting Hare Krishna on the streets, which both are wonderful and essential and life-changing, but even the ordinary interactions with people, they should kind of get a sense of like, wow, that person is different. Not that we're exclusive. There's like wonderful spiritual people of different traditions, but there should be a difference between a person who's got a spiritual vision and who's practicing some kind of sadhana, who's trying to like elevate their own consciousness, and an ordinary person who's like struggling under the modes of material nature because they don't really know anything better, and they're very influenced by a lot of the negativity in the world. We really got to get to the point we float above that a little bit, and it shows in how we interact with other people. I think that's a critical part of how we can help change the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful takeaway. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, if you want to get in touch with Anuttama Prabhu, I'll probably put something in the description, maybe.
Like your phone number, so they can call you and you can filter the calls. And get back to me.
Exactly, something like that.
I haven't even had a secretary for the most of my life as this communications director.
Wow.
That's kind of like some of the systems we need to get in place. Right now I have somebody helping me a few hours a week, but I sometimes go for years. And, those are the kind of limitations. People think, the GBC body.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but, where's the resources? We don't have very much support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're getting there, though, huh?
Yeah.
Getting there.
Yeah.
Getting there.
Okay, thank you again. Thanks, Venkata. Thank you, Prabhu, again. Haribol.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be
Haribol.
here.
So for everyone listening,
I just like to say to the podcast world that you're much nicer in person than you are online. That's what I like to say.
really?
In case there's any
Let's
doubts.
talk offline. Let's talk offline what you mean by that.
In case there's any doubts out there, you're both really very nice people.
Oh, you've been roped in now, too.
Oh, wow. my reputation precedes me, so. All right.
Hare
Haribol.
Krishna. Oh, so I'm supposed to be at the temple.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.